If you're looking for a car, there are literally millions of combinations you could choose from. So many decisions to make, from the color to the trim to the number of doors. But what about the most basic question of any car? How does the power get to the ground? It's the most fundamental part of an automobile, and we still can't agree on how to do it best. Do you want the drive to the front or to the back? That's what we're here to talk about today on Versus front-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive. We are going to be looking at front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive across 5 categories: availability, trackability, daily ability, fixability, and customizability. Each will be scored with a potential 5 points each. The one with the most points at the end of the video will definitively be the best of the two, and I will try and remain as impartial as I can throughout this video, letting the numbers do the talking. Round 1 is all about availability. What kind of cars exist in each drivetrain configuration, how many of them are there, and how do they vary? Front-wheel drive cars are the most popular in the world, but it wasn't always the case. Before the 60s, most cars were rear-wheel drive. This was mainly due to the ease of construction. Front-wheel drive cars had been done before, but one car really started the trend. The 1959 Austin Mini. It had a transversely mounted engine, transmission, and differential, which meant there was no need for a transmission tunnel, and the floor of the tiny car could be flat, giving it much more room inside. This design was a hit, and it was copied and copied over and over until we reached the modern day, where front-wheel drive cars completely dominate the subcompact, compact, and mid-size markets. In 2014, only 12% of cars sold in America were rear-wheel drive. Rear-wheel drive cars are also usually of a specific type. They hold the market share of sports cars, luxury sports, and exotics. Just because rear-wheel drive cars are the most popular sports cars doesn't make them the most available fast cars. Any brand new rear-wheel drive car is going to cost you more than $24,000, and for that, you're getting like a Fiat 124 Spider or a 4-cylinder Camaro 1LS. Throw that money at a front-wheel drive car, and you're looking at well-optioned Fiesta STs, Veloster Turbos, and Fiat 500 Abarth. Is Abarth the plural? I'm not even sure. And even if you're not looking at factory options, you could get a Fiesta ST with a Stage 3 power pack and a Cobb Access port before you can even get a spoiler on that Camaro. You'd be 30 horsepower down, but 1,000 pounds lighter. The economy of making an economy car has made it easier to then progress to making them faster and more fun. Did you know that most minivans are front-wheel drive, but most full-size vans are rear-wheel drive? Full-size vans are rear-wheel drive because they're built on the chassis of base model full-size trucks. So rear-wheel drive cars are all based off of speed performance, off-road and hauling performance, or they're parts bin cars, and that's kind of the problem. Performance cars are moving towards all-wheel drive. Look at traditionally rear-wheel drive sports cars like the 911 and NSX. If chasing performance means putting more power to the road, rear-wheel drive isn't going to be around much longer. And with non-performance cars being rear-wheel drive because they're borrowing parts that were already made, the rear-wheel drive model numbers are going to shrink twice as fast. Even truck makers all see the benefit of all-wheel drive, and once it becomes cheap enough to develop as a base model, they won't use those 2 back wheels alone anymore. Front-wheel drive, however, will keep kicking for years to come. It's the only choice for cheap economy cars. Right now, the cheapest front-wheel drive car on the US market is the Chevy Spark, starting at a little over $13,000. The cheapest all-wheel drive car is $4,000 more than that, and the cheapest rear-wheel drive car is $7,000 more than that. Rear-wheel drive cars are some of the coolest out there, but as far as availability goes, it's not easy to get your hands on one, and it's only going to get harder. I'm going to give them 2 points. Front-wheel drive cars are cheap, plentiful, and have a long future ahead of them while still having a decent amount of history. I'm marking them down for 4 points. It looks like front-wheel drive cars have some catching up to do, so let's see how tight they hang on in the next round. This round is focused on performance on track and in motorsport. This is the stuff I love, the numbers, the stats, the lap times, and I'm sure all of you are happy I'm no longer talking about the base model viability of cars. Rear-wheel drive cars are all over motorsport. F1 is rear-wheel drive, IndyCar is rear-wheel drive, NASCAR is rear-wheel drive, Formula Drift is rear-wheel drive. In fact, the only race series that currently use any front-wheel drive cars are grassroots series based on cars that were once road legal. There was once a front-wheel drive car that qualified for the Indy 500 in 1927, but it never finished the race. So why does rear-wheel drive have such a stranglehold on motorsport? Is it just because that's how these series started? Well, the main factor is weight transfer. As the car accelerates, it leans back, weight gets sent backwards, and the back wheels get pushed into the ground. For rear-wheel drive cars, this means the drive wheels are gaining more mechanical grip as they accelerate. For front-wheel drive cars, the drive wheels are getting lighter and less grippy as they're being lifted into the air. But rear-wheel drive cars aren't perfect in this. Overdo it and you'll lose traction. In my track experience, I've had 3 spins. Guess which car they were all in. For front-wheel drive cars though, losing grip due to over-acceleration means the car will slow down, which means the weight will transfer to the front, the tires will get more grip, and you can catch a mistake a lot easier. Front-wheel drive cars also have an advantage when it comes to wet conditions. Since their biggest weakness is weight transfer, it makes sense that when the whole field has less grip, they aren't affected as much. Because of this, amateur rallycross is a sport where if you're not in an all-wheel drive Subi with a missing rear bumper, you're probably in a front-wheel drive car. Winning more traditional motorsports events in a front-wheel drive car is not impossible though. Stefan Papadakis' 1998 Honda Civic drag racer broke into the 8-second quarter-mile times, and the Civic Coupe built by PZ Tuning holds 4 global time attack records. Not front-wheel drive records, overall. The modern-day Civic Type R is an absolute track weapon. It laps the Nürburgring in 7 minutes and 43 seconds. If you wanted to match that pace with a rear-wheel drive car, you'd be spending 3 times as much money at a Porsche dealership. Could it be that front-wheel drive cars can be just as good at motorsport as rear-wheel drive, and it's just that manufacturers don't build them for performance? Kinda. It's not as cut and dry as that. Rear-wheel drive cars still have the advantage in most circumstances, and the skilled driver can avoid the pitfalls of rear-wheel drive. With that being said, I'm gonna give 3 points to front-wheel drive for the amazing honorable mentions that they do have, but 4 points to rear-wheel drive for holding on to the lion's share of performance development. Rear-wheel drive is using that 1-point track advantage to close the gap, as there's only 1 point between them now, so let's see what happens in the next round. The next round is all about daily ability. How easy is it to have these cars on a day-to-day basis? Right now, I drive a rear-wheel drive car day-to-day, and I don't mind it at all in Southern California. But anywhere else in the world, it gets a little bit harder. Front-wheel drive cars, as we mentioned last round, have a natural advantage when it comes to grip in slippery conditions. If you live somewhere with rain or mud or snow, it's easy to lose traction in a rear-wheel drive car. It doesn't take owning a Dodge Hellcat to kick the tail out on accident. All it takes is a lead foot and a slick intersection. Also, the advantages of weight transfer that a rear-wheel drive car has don't really apply on the road unless you're launching from every stoplight. And I, for one, am definitely not launching from every stoplight. Front-wheel drive cars are manufactured for comfort and ease of use. The entire concept behind them was to have a flat-floored cabin which could allow for more space. Part of how this was achieved was with an engine, transmission, and differential all being constructed and designed together. No U-joints, no drive shafts, and less fluid needed. All components ended up lighter, and a lighter car is easier to drive. The lack of rotational mass also makes them more fuel economic. But while front-wheel drive cars all have this configuration, it doesn't mean rear-wheel drive cars don't. Let's look at the Toyota Celica and Toyota MR2 Spider. Both are small, two-wheel drive sports cars powered by Toyota 1ZZ engines. But one is front-wheel drive and one is rear-wheel drive. With the MR2 being mid-engined, it gains a lot of the packaging advantages of a front-wheel drive car. you have the same fuel economy and power as the front-wheel drive Celica. This is honestly academic though, as cheap mid-engine cars are rare and you can't tell me that an MR2 is an ideal daily driver. In the same way that front-wheel drive can make a good track car, rear-wheel drive cars could be built to be better dailies, but no manufacturer is really doing it, and it's a lot of R&D dollars just to prove a point. For being efficient, forgiving, and spacious, front-wheel drive cars get 4 points in this category, and for having downsides but none of them really being too detrimental, I'm giving rear-wheel drive 3 points. That's a 2-point gap going into the next round. Let's see if rear-wheel drive cars can put the power down and claw their way to the top spot. The fourth round is all about how easy it is to fix these cars and how often problems occur in the first place. In general though, front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive cars have some key differences when it comes to maintenance. Parts for front-wheel drive cars are generally cheaper and smaller than the equivalent rear-wheel drive car. This isn't just because of front-wheel drive's place in the market either. Front-wheel drivetrains are built more efficiently, which means less parts and less wear. In theory, manufacturers are always building to a margin, so they're not going to give you parts that can handle much more than average abuse unless they're grabbing from like a parts bin. In general though, there's lots more that can go wrong with a rear-wheel drive front-engine drivetrain than with a front-engine front-drive configuration. The transfer of power down the whole chassis through so many components means there are more points of failure. Front-wheel drive cars also don't need separate fluid for diff and transmission because it's all in one unit. CV axles tend to be a failure point on front-wheel drive cars, but they need replacing around about as often as a rear differential bushing, so it's not much worse. Where the tables really turn is with transmissions. A clutch replacement on a rear-wheel drive car can take a skilled mechanic under 2 hours. On a front-wheel drive car though, you're disconnecting all the front steering, control arms, end links, and dropping the front subframe. I just put an ACT clutch in my Yaris over the winter and it took me 10 days. Now, 95% of that is because I don't know what I'm doing, but most mechanics are looking at over 6 hours to properly swap a Yaris clutch, and that's without power steering. Differential work is also a big pain on front-wheel drive cars. If you want to see how easy it is to remove a rear differential, just watch James do it on High Low.
Hi, I'm James. Today, we're gonna lube some grooves.
The overall takeaway is that most front-wheel drive cars can run for longer with only standard maintenance, but when there is an issue, rear-wheel drive cars are easier to fix because the parts are more spread out and easier to access. Though the parts costs are cheaper on those front-wheel drive repairs, so the bill might not be as bad as you think. Since you may have to shell out a big chunk at once for a front-wheel drive car's repair, I'm gonna give them 3 points. And for having more points of failure and more expensive parts, I'm gonna give rear-wheel drive cars also 3 points. We've got one more round to go. Front-wheel drive is still ahead by 2 points, but let's see if the last round can turn the tide. The final round is all about customizability. How much can you actually make these cars your own? On the low end of things, it's pretty similar. There's no reason that either car couldn't have any ride height, any forced induction setup, any body styling, and any suspension you want. The car scene is full of Hondas from every end of the spectrum and Camaros that can run the gambit of styles and setups. On an entry to mid-level, you can find unique parts for just about any car. The aftermarket has grown to be so big and so all-encompassing, drivetrain doesn't really affect customization on an average budget. The place where we really see the separation is engine swaps. With front-engine, rear-wheel drive cars, the sky is the limit when it comes to engine swaps. Do you want to see an LS Datsun? It's been done. Do you want to see a Ferrari engined 86? It's been done. Engine swaps are the upper echelon of customization, but front-wheel drive cars have some crazy swaps too. Take a look at this Hayabusa swapped Mini Cooper, or this LSX swapped Civic, or this super fat Fiat 500 hiding a Lamborghini V12. If you've got the determination, you can get any engine into any car. There's just one problem. All those front-wheel drive cars I mentioned, they're no longer front-wheel drive cars. The thing is, if a motor is designed for rear-wheel drive, the geometry of where the power gets delivered, it's so far off from where a front-wheel drive car would need it, It's way easier to get a custom drive shaft and just swap in the rear end of a rear-wheel drive car. With a rear-wheel drive car though, you can use any engine you can fit if you mount it the right way around. Take a look at this K-Series swapped FRS. It uses a longitudinally mounted turbocharged K24 and transmission from an S2000. The K24 is the engine from a Honda Civic Si, which is like the people's champion of front-wheel drive cars. And these guys made it drive the rear wheels of this Scion. An engine that fought hard on the front lines of front-wheel drive cars has now defected to the other side of the cockpit. Rear-wheel drive simply has the edge in this category because the engine bay isn't filled with transmissions and CV axles. For having almost no limit on what you can make, I'm going to give rear-wheel drive cars 5 points in this category. But for representing with some crazy builds and for having such a big impact on tuner culture in the first place, I can't give front-wheel drive cars anything less than 4 points. Which means that front-wheel drive is our winner. And man, did these numbers shock us. Everyone in the office was convinced that rear-wheel drive was gonna be the big winner. But what do you guys think? Let us know in the comments if you're into front-wheel drive cars like me, or if you're into rear-wheel drive cars like me. Hey everybody, I hope you're staying safe. Just wanna let you know that Donut Media is putting out 7 shows a week right now, so be sure to follow Donut Media on YouTube and the Donut Podcast channel, and be sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter as well to stay up to date.